Yes, thank you, Tom. I just something that you said before, and I've heard it a number of times, which is um, the greater the ignorance, the greater the suffering. And I just think it doesn't seem to. I have this idea that people who are really in full ignorance are actually a lot happier
Yeah,
than people who are in the transitional stage of coming out of ignorance. Is a lot more. There's a lot more suffering involved.
yeah, yeah. It can feel that way, and it can seem that way. It's like when you're walking down the streets and you can see into like pubs and restaurants, and it looks like everyone's having a great time, and you're out in the dark street maybe on a Friday evening, and you can, you're just like, you're exhausted after a day of work or whatever, and you walk down the streets and you can see people are laughing and they're drinking and they're smoking and they're abusing their bodies and they're having a great time of it. You know, it can seem like that, but actually, it can feel like ignorance is bliss, right? But it isn't. It's deep, deep suffering. It's deep, deep suffering. Now, sometimes, see, often ignorance can be bliss for a while, but then eventually it comes crashing down. This might be a bit debatable, but it doesn't always come crashing down in a single lifetime. But usually what happens is that at some point, the ignorance or the belief systems that allow someone to remain in ignorant bliss start to show cracks in them. Holes start to appear. And one of the biggest teachers are things that happen to everyone, every human body, such as sickness, old age, death, these things. That causes pain and suffering. And you can't escape those things, you see. So it seems like ignorance is bliss, but people are always worried about that to a greater or lesser extent, consciously or subconsciously. Some people just don't think about it. They don't think about tomorrow. And that's their way of dealing with it, right? But those, and maybe they, and there are different ways you can do that. You can sort of become a foodaholic. You can become an alcoholic. You can take drugs. You can dull your senses in all these different ways. So you can avoid the realities, the harsh realities that can be sometimes here in our everyday life. But the reason you avoid to do all this avoidance behavior is because you're suffering inwardly, deeply. The thing about the spiritual seeking is there are a few things. One is that usually a spiritual seeker has a certain type of sensitivity to them, which makes them more sensitive to suffering in some ways, because they're more aware of it often. And that self-aware aspect can intensify suffering that wouldn't bother other people so much. Some spiritual seekers have fairly nice lives outwardly, but inwardly they're suffering intensely because they're more sensitive to their suffering, because the awareness is there. You see, that can happen. The other thing about the spiritual path is that it's often an isolating path. I mean, look at all you people here on this call. You're all from different parts of the country, different parts of the world. Why have you come here? Probably because there isn't someone around the corner from you where you can go to this kind of meeting and have this kind of discussion. Okay, Sarah and Gordon are smiling because they actually live around the corner from me. They actually do, guys. They live around the corner from me, literally. But yeah, you don't. You don't. Usually there's not someone around the corner from you. So it can be very isolating. And even if there is a group that's around the corner from you, often they're not quite the right one. They sort of, the people aren't quite. This is the experience people tell me all the time. So it's the isolation as well makes it very difficult. There's no one to share it with. No one who really, very few people understand this, because most people are not seekers of liberation. They're seekers of other things. You see? The other thing is that there's nothing you can do about it, Rebecca. You know, say ignorance was bliss. The problem with this is there's no turning back. I'm sorry to say, you can't go back. And every seeker I have met, always at some point in their journey, and sometimes many points in their journey, wishes they were never a seeker. Wishes they weren't cursed with this seeking thing. They wish they could just be like everyone else. You know, I wish I was like everyone else. There is no everyone else. Probably everyone else wishes they'll be like everyone else as well. Most people, as you get to know them better, you realize that they wish they were like everyone else. And this everyone else is a myth. It's like looking on Instagram or Facebook and everyone's having the time of their life. You know, it seems like everyone's successful and happy and healthy and good looking. And then and it's just the confusion is in your life. But no, it's not true. Don't believe it. The more you get to know people, the more you see the suffering inside them. It can be helpful to realize that. People outwardly seem so happy, but in ignorance sometimes, but often they're not. But even if they are, there's nothing you can do about it. You are a seeker. It's like you've gone past the point of no return. You can't undo that spiritual desire once you have it. You've been bitten by that desire. As Ramana used to say, your head's now in the tiger's mouth. Have you heard that before? Your head's in the tiger's mouth. And the head symbolizes the ego. When you become a spiritual seeker, especially when you're drawn to Ramana's teachings, if ever, again, my personal bias coming out here, unashamedly, if you are drawn to Ramana's teaching, if you're genuinely drawn to it, your head is in the tiger's mouth. Means it's only a matter of time before that tiger crushes that ego. But it's done. It's as good as done. It's just a matter of time.